Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to look at using icons in list items. And a lot of what I'm going to say here also applies to using icons generally, for example as the background of a button or in a image button. So at the moment I've got this application here and I've got these specially formatted list items. And if I look at the XML that formats each item, I've got a linear layout nested within a linear layout, and this inner linear layout isn't any use at the moment, but the reason I added it was because I want to add an image icon here that will have an icon on it. So this one's a horizontal linear layout and this one's vertical, and the inner one lays out these bits of text underneath each other, and this outer one I want to lay out first an image icon and then the two bits of text horizontally. So if you start Explorer on your system, you'll find that you already have a useful source of free icons on your computer, and you can of course create icons, preferably as .png files if you want, using any kind of image software like GIMP or Inkscape or two good free ones. But if you go to, if you look for your Android SDK folder, and I installed my Android SDKs using Eclipse, and if you install them yourself they're liable to end up in your C program files folder on Windows. But if you install via Eclipse and you're using Windows, they seem to end up in C users, and here's my username, John, whoops, and this Android-SDKs folder. And then once you find this folder, wherever it is, if you go to platforms and pick an Android platform and data, resources, and pick one of these drawable folders, for example not the language specific ones that just have like a little bit of stuff in them, but one of the kind of drawable -HDPI or LDPI or MDPI or the other one. So let's look at drawable HDPI for example, and in here you can find a whole bunch of icons which, as far as I understand, because Android is open source, I think you can use these in your application as long as you release the Creative Commons share-alike license that Android, I believe, is released under with your application. But don't take my word for that, please check into this yourself. But as far as I know, you can basically use these icons. Now I want to use a couple of these icons here. If you look through here, I quite like these sort of circular icons. In fact there's a whole group of them here somewhere, if I can just find them. So lots of icons to cover virtually every situation here, and there's some circular ones there, but I think the ones that I want are not these stars. Well, I really can't find them. Hang on, what I'll do is, oh here we are, yeah, we've got them. Okay, so I thought that I'm kind of formatting here a list of fake email messages, and I thought I'd kind of have one icon for if the message has been read supposedly, and one icon if it hasn't. But for the moment I'll just have one icon that will do for both cases. So I'm gonna take this icon, I think, and let's also have a kind of grayer version of that, like this one here. And I'm just gonna in fact, if I right click on this and copy these, I think this will work, and then I go to Eclipse, and now I got those from the drawable HDPI folder here. So if I click on my drawable HDPI folder here in Eclipse, right click now and go to paste and expand that, I can paste those icons in, and you can also drag them in directly if you arrange your windows appropriately. And if you're going to release your application for multiple screen densities, as with images, you want to drag in icons for each of the separate possible pixel densities, screen pixel densities that you want to support. But just for brevity here, I'll just use this HDPI one for the moment. Now I can create a image view in here that will do for displaying my icon. So I'm going to say here image view, and let's give it an ID. So I'll say ID, Android ID, and I need this @ plus ID, and let's call it list, something like list message icon. I'm trying to prefix everything in this list with list underscore, so I can remember that it's a list, and then message underscore, so I can remember which list it is. And I need to give it some dimensions as well, so I'll say layout width, and let's make this wrap content, and layout height I'll also make wrap content. That will probably work, and I'll just format that with Ctrl+Shift+F. And let's look at this warning here. So it's probably the content, the content description. So let's just give it a content description just to shut it up, and say in here email message, like that. And I'll just extract this string, so I'll just select it and go to right click, go to quick fix, extract string, and I'll get it to put that string in strings.xml, like that. So now we've got an ID here, and that string is actually in the strings.xml file. Okay, so that looks good. The error hasn't gone away, and it's not letting me save it for some reason. Let's just put a blank line in, save all. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now I can set the icon on this image view, and for a minute let's just say let's just set the source here, and if I now use autocomplete and go to drawable, because I added that icon to drawable HDPI, the two icons actually, if I use autocomplete again in here, I can select one of my image, an ID that corresponds to one of my images, and if I save that, and I probably also want here, I want to say padding. I want some padding around my image. Let's say 5 device independent pixels, just to kind of space things out a bit, so that the text on here, so the image is going to appear here at the left, and I want the text not to be directly next to it, but a little distance away from it. And now the other thing I need to do here is, if I run this now, you'll see that I actually set my text views to have a black background, but the image is transparent. Those icons actually have a transparent background, which you can see if you open them in GIMP, the free photo manipulation tool, for example. And I don't want this to show through like the colour of the underlying screen, which is probably white. So what I want to do is, I'm going to take this background out of the text views, and I'm going to paste it into my enclosing linear layout up here, so I can give the linear layout a black background. And then the text view controls, most of the controls in Android are transparent, and if you don't give them a background, usually they'll show through the background behind them. So if you set the linear layouts background, then hopefully the whole thing will be black as we want, and we'll be in business. So I'll save that and I'll click run. And actually there's another thing that I forgot, which is I probably have to set gravity, and I want to set that to probably vertical center. Let's see, so center vertical here, because what that will do is it will make sure the image is centered vertically rather than having it up near the top of the image item or something. So I don't know if it's got my center vertical in or not, but it looks good. And I think maybe I accidentally cut the green text color out of my first text, because it's appearing a sort of dull grey color, but I think that's basically it. So there's the icon. I think it looks quite nice. But now a further step, a further refinement here, is we could have a different icon potentially for each item in the list, but here I think I want to say that my list items can have one of two different states, and I want to have a different icon for each state. So two different icons depending on the actual email message. So let's take a look at an example of that. And I'm going to look at my message here, my message class, which represents This holds the data underlying the items in my list, and we saw this in a previous tutorial. And I'm going to give this a private boolean red, which I'll initialize to false. So this is to say whether the message has been read or not. And I'm just going to right click here, somewhere down here, and go to source, generate getters and setters, and tick red, click OK. So now we've got set red and is red. So if you have a boolean, the corresponding getter will be is rather than get. So these allow us to get and set the red value, and I'll set it to false by default. And let's have another constructor here which will allow me to set whether the message has been read or not. So let's say here boolean red, and then I can say this.red equals red. And now let's take a look at when I create the messages in my main activity here. This is a bit of an artificially contrived situation, but let's have some of them true and some of them false. So I'll make this one false, and let's make the last one true. This is just setting whether these messages have supposedly been read or not. Now the challenge is now to give these a different icon depending on whether they've been read or not. So in my message adapter here, I'm going to I need to get the image icon here. I need to get this from the view so that I can change its icon. So to do that, it's pretty much similar to getting a text view here. Let's just copy that, and I'll say here image view, and I need to cast the return value here to an image view, and let's call that icon view, and let's change this to r.id dot, and Eclipse is complaining again, but here we go, list message icon. So that's the ID of my image view in this list here. So I'll save that and add the import for image view there, Control-Shift-O. And now let's say here we need to get the appropriate icon for the message. So I'll say here boolean is red, and I'll say equals message dot get red, not get red, dot is red. There we go. So I'm getting the red status of that message, and now I can create a drawable. So I can say drawable icon, and let's set that equal to null just for a minute, and just add the import for drawable there. And a drawable is basically, of course, a thing that you can draw, and in this case it's going to be an icon. And now I can say, I can use my context, which is I've got a context here which I passed in my constructor, and the context is just a reference to the activity which implements the context interface, and I can use that to say context dot get resources dot get drawable, and I can supply the ID for my icons in here. Now I want to do two different things here depending upon the whether the message is read or not. So let's say if is read. In fact, yeah, I guess what I could do, I could say int icon ID, and let's choose the icon ID here. So I could set it by default to and let's say here r.drawable dot and I'll set this focused kind of icon that I used, that I dragged in by I was going to say by mistake, I don't know why, that I dragged in from the Android icon set. And then I'll say if is read, I'll change that and I'll say icon ID equals r.drawable dot and I'll set this disabled one instead of the focused one, which is kind of the grey version of that icon. So we're using r.drawable instead of r.id because that's how you refer to things in these drawable folders. And it doesn't matter that we haven't got a drawable folder. We've just got drawable LDPI, drawable HDPI, and so on. As long as you've added images to one folder, you should have that ID. As long as you've saved things and your program is built successfully, you can reference these from all.java. And as I say, you probably should drag icons into each of these folders from the separate corresponding image folders that you're using, or else create different sizes for them yourself, and check on the Android developer guide for suitable icon sizes if you want. But let's just use this one for the moment. And so now I can say context.getResources.getDrawable, and I can pass the icon ID in. So I'm passing in the icon ID like this one or this one, depending on whether this message is read or not, which I've got from my message. And now finally, so this returns a drawable, and I can say drawable icon equals, and now I've got my reference to my icon view. And so let's what's the problem here? Oh yeah, I've already got this drawable icon. Let's delete that one up there because we don't need it. And now I can say icon view dot set, I think it's set image. Yeah, and we've got this view of set image, actually set image drawable, which sets the drawable, and I can pass in the icon there. And finally now, if I run this with a bit of luck, we will change the icon depending on whether the message has supposedly been read or not. And you can use this technique here to set icons on all kinds of things. Of course, it's not really restricted to list items. And here we see that the read messages are sort of grey, they have greyish icons, and the unread ones have these bright blue icons. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and in the next tutorial we're probably going to move on to looking at styling these a bit, because we shouldn't really have the text colours directly hard-coded into the layout, and we also want it so that when the user touches these list items, they kind of briefly flash a different colour to indicate they've been touched. And we'll look at that next time, I should think. So join me again next time, and until then, happy coding.